Good morning and welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. I'm your host, Jen Sanasi. My co-hosts, Emily Parker and Lawrence Lewitton, have the day off. Lucky them. Nonetheless, I'm here to get you through the top news of the day. Let's take a look at what's happening in the markets this morning. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index is currently at 29,495. Little movement this morning, up almost 1%. Let's see if Ether is following suit. I think it is. The CoinDesk Ether price ETX index 1,877, up just over 1%. Let's see what's happening with DeFi. The DFX, CoinDesk's DeFi index, it's a little bump, up almost 4% at 126. All right, let's take a look at our top story today. U.S. prosecutors want FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried to spend the remainder of his time in jail ahead of his criminal trial. Joining us now to discuss is CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who's also the editor of CoinDesk's State of Crypto newsletter. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. I am certainly in, I think, better shape than Mr. Bankman-Fried.
I think we all are. So the Department of Justice is alleging that he's tried multiple times to tamper with witnesses. Talk to me about what the DOJ is saying here and what they want to happen.
Yeah, so yesterday there was a hearing in the courthouse in Manhattan where the DOJ opened up and said, we were seeking detention for Sam Bankman-Fried. So the DOJ alleged last week that he shared Carolyn Ellison, the former Alameda Research CEO and one-time romantic partner of Bankman-Fried, with the New York Times, basically in an effort to discredit her as a witness or a possible witness in court when his criminal trial starts in October. The DOJ says this isn't the first time. They pointed to the fact that Bankman-Fried had previously reached out to Ryan Miller, the former FTX US general counsel, in what the DOJ says was also an effort to try and basically influence his testimony, something the judge agreed with. And now they want to, remand him to jail for the remainder of the time prior to his trials beginning. They're saying there's no set of release conditions that they believe would protect the public interest or general public. And so, yeah, that's where they're at.
How are Bankman-Fried's lawyers responding to this?
Well, they're obviously disputing the characterization of the letter. They say that, Bankman-Fried wasn't trying to discredit a witness or, influence testimony. But their position is that there have been, quote, over 1 million negative articles about Bankman-Fried and literally thousands of, about him and Ellison. So their view or their position is that Bankman-Fried has a First Amendment right to, make a fair comment, to basically, defend himself and try and, clean up his reputation. So they're saying that they would agree to, and what they expected was, a kind of a blanket gag order preventing anyone in the case from speaking to the media or, making other public comments. But they think that detention is A, going too far, and B, they say it would make it more difficult to organize Bankman-Fried's defense because so many documents are only accessible through online tools and online, systems.
So what could happen next year if he is restricted from communicating publicly?
So to be clear, the judge did order an interim gag order, basically preventing any kind of public comment. But kind of, the more, I think, serious thing for Bankman-Fried and his team, the judge has given the prosecution until tomorrow to basically lay out a case for why they believe he should be remanded into custody. The defense has until Tuesday to respond, and then the prosecution can make one more, written submission by the end of next Thursday, saying, okay, here's what our response is to the defense response. So it sure seems like we are headed to a position where the judge is either going to order another hearing or otherwise, review just the written submissions and say, okay, well, either A, Mr. Bankman-Fried is going to have to spend the remainder of the time before trial in prison, or B, he might decide, okay, well, the gag order is sufficient and XYZ. But it is worth noting he did end yesterday's hearing by, quite directly speaking to Bankman-Fried, warning him to, quote, take the matter seriously.
Nick, I think we should just change the name of this segment to Sam Bankman-Fried Watch. We could have some kind of sensational intro. It would be very suiting. The last question I have for you here is about this campaign finance charge that was dropped by the DOJ. Why did we see that dropped?
Yeah, so this actually, we're going to get a little bit into like the procedural stuff here. So of course, Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas last year and extradited to the U.S. As part of that, the Bahamas had a document with the list of proposed charges, and they had to functionally agree to those charges before extradition. Now, Bankman-Fried had previously argued that certain charges that the DOJ brought in superseding indictments, meaning they brought them after his extradition and arrest in the U.S., that they shouldn't be tried on those charges because the Bahamas had not agreed to them. And the judge at the time said, okay, we'll schedule a separate trial for March 2024 and give the Bahamas a chance to weigh in on these additional charges and, basically sort out all of the extradition treaty issues. Last night, the U.S. Department of Justice said that they had consulted with the Bahamas and found that the campaign finance charge, which they originally said was part of the first 8 charges that they had extradited him on, was not actually part of the extradition document that the Bahamas had. And so they need the Bahamas' permission, basically, to charge him on that. The implication is that, this campaign finance charge may come up in the March 2024 trial now instead of the October 2023 trial. They didn't say that, but based on how they treated the other charges that they, severed and moved into March 2024, that does kind of seem to be, the implicit understanding a lot of people would have as to how that might be treated. But of course, we're still waiting on the DOJ to confirm that one way or another.
All right, Nick, thanks for joining us this morning and laying out the details there. That was CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day. Don't forget to sign up for the State of Crypto newsletter on CoinDesk.com.
The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
Joining us now with more legal analysis on Sam Bankman-Fried's upcoming trial is ZFZ Law co-founder Michael Zweiback. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right. We're continuing this SBF watch that we started the show off with. You have significant experience in white-collar criminal defense. In your opinion, were the judge's actions and SBF's hearing fair here?
Oh, they were definitely fair. I think this judge has given him a lot of opportunity to sort of correct the behavior before trial. But this judge is clearly exasperated with Mr. Bankman-Fried, and it's sort of a bad move on his part to continue to poke this judge and create issues that really should be, at this point, not an issue.
In your experience, have you seen people act in this way ahead of trial, and how have you seen the courts respond? Is this a normal response that we're seeing from the judge?
Well, it's nothing about this case is normal. Mr. Bankman-Fried's behavior and his sort of intent to continue to comment on the facts of the case are unusual. Typically, your defense team is going to step in and prohibit you from doing this. Mr. Bankman-Fried definitely has a mind of his own and seems to be insistent that he needs to have access to comment on all the various issues related to his case.
If you were his lawyer, how would you be advising him right now?
Stop talking. I've said this from the very beginning. He is only undermining his ability to get a fair trial in front of a jury. It's also the fact that he continues to create issues in front of the court that is going to be overseeing the trial in this case, as well as potentially sentencing him. And his behavior indicates that he just refuses to accept any form of responsibility if that becomes an issue later on in the case for sentencing.
You know, it's not like he doesn't have a good legal team supporting him. His parents are lawyers. Are you surprised that this is continuing to move forward the way it is for him?
Well, I'm not surprised because defendants with his level of ego seem to always think that they know better than their defense attorneys. even with the absolute best of defense teams, and certainly he has one of those, sometimes just cannot control their clients' mindsets.
All right. Now, we set the story up a little bit with Nick prior to you joining us. Do you anticipate that other conditions of his bail will change ahead of the trial in October?
Well, I think this judge is probably of a mindset to impose a formal gag order. I think that I don't know that he's there yet on actually imprisoning Bankman-Fried right now. I suspect that there will be a gag order that will be placed as part of this, and we'll see what the next steps are. But Mr. Bankman-Fried's rope is running out on this, and I think this judge is close to putting him in jail.
In your opinion, is this gag order a direct result of these leaked diary entries that the New York Times published, or is it a slow burn that led up to this?
Well, I'm actually surprised. I've been in very high-profile cases where the gag orders were imposed at the very beginning and outset. And given the international media attention to this case, I'm sort of surprised that there wasn't one at the very beginning.
All right. And if it's proven true, could those diary leaks amount to an instance of witness tampering here, and maybe unpack what this actually means for the trial?
Well, witness tampering as a crime requires an intent to dissuade a witness to testify. I think in this case, it was more of an attempt to undercut her credibility. So I don't think it really rises to the level of the crime of witness intimidation, but it certainly is an attempt to get to her general credibility as a witness, her bias and motivations, and it also is a warning shot to other witnesses. Look, I've got a lot of information about you, and this is a warning shot, and I think that's why the judge in this case has to impose this gag order and stop the parties from talking.
And how might it affect the jury? How might it affect jury selection?
In these types of high-profile cases, the jury is going to have heard just about everything possible on this case. I don't think that the case law is pretty clear that the pretrial publicity it's very difficult to sort of create a case where you cannot find a jury pool that would be fair and able to sit for this type of case. So. In a city like New York, I expect that they'll be able to find a jury, and I don't expect that the media attention will really ultimately impact the ability to find a fair jury.
In those diary entries that were leaked to the New York Times, we heard Caroline Ellison say that she didn't think that she was suited to be running the company. We heard a lot about the inner workings of the company that have come out in various different aspects leading up to this trial. What do you anticipate is going to happen? We have Caroline Ellison as a star witness for the prosecution. What do you anticipate is going to happen when this starts in October?
Well, there's been a lot of focus on the fact that she is going to be the star witness. She's not going to be the only star witness. There will be others that certainly have already pled guilty. A lot of the prosecution's case is going to rely upon text messages, written email communications, things that are going to corroborate the facts that ultimately are part of the crime here. So it's not just going to be based upon her spoken word. It's going to be based upon other people's statements and the interactions of the various witnesses that'll prove this fraud.
Michael, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
That was ZFZ Law co-founder Michael Zweiback. We're going to take a short break. On the other side of the break, a deep dive into Meta after the Facebook parent company reported earnings, plus a crypto markets update. Good morning and welcome back to First Mover. Facebook parent company Meta reported its latest quarterly earnings results last night, and its Reality Labs unit, which is focused on developing the metaverse, brought in $276 million in sales during the second quarter, while posting a loss of $3.7 billion. Joining us now to discuss is Chief Metaverse Officer at Journey, Cathy Hackl. Good morning, Cathy.
Good morning.
All right, let's talk about this earnings call. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg said investments in AI will continue. Surprise, surprise. And he remains fully committed to the metaverse vision. What do you think of the approach so far? What did you make of some of the comments on the call?
Well, it was an interesting call. It feels like the year of efficiency is turning into the year of the comeback for Meta. I mean, shareholders, I think it was a very positive outlook. Shareholders, I think, are pretty excited about that. During the call, he definitely talked a lot about AI. It felt like almost every fifth word was artificial intelligence, like we've seen in a lot of the earnings calls. But yeah, he definitely talked about how AI, the investments they've made in AI are proving to be very successful and leading to growth for the company, and they're going to continue to invest in AI, which is going to lead to capital expenses related to capacity, AI workloads, and also trying to hire more staff, more technical staff for AI, which obviously is coming at a premium right now.
It's interesting. We talk about hiring more staff for AI when recently, we learned that Meta let go of a lot of staff in their metaverse division. We heard about billions of dollars lost on the metaverse play, but Zuckerberg seems still long-term bullish on the metaverse. Talk to me about what we learned on that front.
Yes, it was really interesting listening to his comments during the call about Reality Labs. The reality of Reality Labs is that they intend to keep going. The losses will continue year after year. They said that very clear on the call because they do see this as the future. He talked about it being a long-term bet. He mentioned, for example, that this is an interesting thing that he said. He said about 1 to 2 billion people around the world wear glasses, and in the future, those will be smart glasses. So I think he's really thinking about what the future holds for the company. He talked as well about the computing being, creating the next computing platform, being influential in that and expanding the ecosystem. So Reality Labs is not going anywhere, even if shareholders are not convinced. It's going to stay around. They're going to continue this long-term bet. He even mentioned that maybe for some of the shareholders and investors, the long-term view and the long-term bet that he's making might not make a lot of sense or something, but that is where he sees the future going towards more immersive experiences. So Reality Labs, even though it's at a loss, will continue to be there, will continue to be a focus for the company when it comes to creating virtual reality, augmented reality, and other products.
It's interesting. He brought up the fact that lots of people wear glasses. We may be using that to access the metaverse. We, of course, saw Meta's very clunky headset. Compare that to what Apple launched just a few months ago. It seems like Facebook might have some competition. Do you see the two firms kind of competing in the hardware sector of the metaverse?
I definitely see them competing in the future. He brought up Apple a few times during the call in not necessarily a positive light. So that was interesting. I think, I really think in September when you have Meta Connect, their big developers conference, they're going to be, launching the MetaQuest 3. And I think we might be shown some of the things that they're doing around smart glasses. I think that there is going to be competition between Meta and between Apple when it comes to those smart glasses. Whether Meta decides to use the term spatial computing like Apple did, I'm still remains to be seen. But I think we're going to see a lot in September of what the Reality Labs behind the scenes has been working on. So we'll see. It's exciting, definitely.
We mentioned some of the components of Reality Labs with VR, AR, Metaverse, social, neural interfaces. What excites you the most, in your opinion? What's the front runner here?
Well, obviously they're leading with virtual reality. And while I've been in VR for a long time and it's exciting, I definitely see more the augmented reality side continuing to be a main focus and one of the most interesting things. I'm personally really interested in neural interfaces and how we engage with these devices. This, what I call the post-smartphone future, something that will replace the smartphone, whatever hardware that is. We're probably going to have to engage with it in very interesting ways. So the neural interfaces, whether it is through brain-computer interfaces that are external, external, or whether it's reading intent through, through our arms or what have you. I think that that's going to be a really interesting place to look at, especially when you see, Apple's doing great things there. Meta's obviously very focused on that as well in the future with Control Labs and acquisition they did. And then you've got also Snap, which acquired NextMind, which is a brain computer interface company as well. So I think we'll see really interesting things there. What I tell you, I am really excited about, and I think not a lot of people are talking about, is the open beta for Roblox on the Meta Quest. Roblox has millions and millions of users, and if you bring that into VR, that could be really, really positive for Meta and VR as we head into the future.
All right, let's change gears here. We got to talk about Threads. Twitter's new rival made its debut, caused a big splash, saw millions of users in just a matter of days. What do you think the future for Threads looks like? Because it feels like everyone signed up for Threads and then we lost all that steam. I mean, I know I have an account and I have not used it past day one.
Yeah, I signed up on day one, same thing. I'm still using it. Sometimes I'm not as active as I was the first week. But they were very positive during the call about Threads, about being really in some ways surprised by how positive this launch went. It was created by a very small team. So once again, focus on efficiency. And I think that that's kind of the way forward for Meta, is smaller teams creating, products or making products better. So definitely leaning into efficiency. And I think one thing he said during the call that to me was really interesting was that Threads as a product, they're not really focused on monetization just yet, or as the main focus, until he said something around until hundreds of millions of people are using Threads. That's going to be the focus. So right now, I think they're just focusing on the product, adding more utility, more things that you can do within Threads. Because right now it's pretty basic. There's some basic, functionalities, but there's a lot of things. I don't think he's going to take, the foot off the pedal when it comes to Threads, because it's been such a successful launch for the company. And it's definitely been a very positive thing for Meta. So we'll see. We'll see, competition with X, former Twitter, or whatever they're called now, will be interesting to see how that comes out at the end.
X is still available via twitter.com, so I will continue calling it Twitter. Do you think Threads has staying power?
I think if they add more functionalities to it, and maybe, I think it does. I think right now, I don't think it's going to go away. I think they need to give users a reason to continue going to it. And I think they're working on that, right? Because it was such a basic functionality. So yeah, I am hopeful. I think that hopefully they'll add audio and, some other things. The power of Threads, it is that it is connected to Instagram, and there's so many users on Instagram. So, it remains to be seen, but, I still use it. I don't use it as often. I do know some people that are becoming power users. So we'll have to see. But I think they were very positive about Threads on the call.
All right, Cathy, we are going to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining this morning.
Thank you.
That was Chief Metaverse Officer at Journey, Cathy Hackl. All right, we're going to turn to the markets now. Bitcoin and Ether are holding steady, shrugging off the 25 basis point rate hike by the Federal Reserve. Joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Morgan Creek Capital CEO and CIO Mark Yusko. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Good morning. Good morning. All right. We are going to talk about this rate hike that everyone was expecting. The Federal Open Market Committee raised its benchmark Fed funds by 25 basis points. The European Central Bank also just announced a rate increase. What's your reaction?
I think it was mostly a non-event. You've seen that in the market reaction. It had been priced in the market for weeks. And, I think the thing that people really are paying more attention to, or should be paying more attention to, is the fact that despite the rhetoric on higher short-term rates, they are still expanding the money supply. So M2 has turned back up really since the bailout of SVB. And I think that's why you've seen things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies do so well. Because remember, we don't price Bitcoin in Bitcoin. We price Bitcoin in dollars or yen or euros. And those currencies are all continuing to weaken.
I want to talk about that increase in liquidity in just a minute, but the next meeting is 8 weeks away in September. What's the likelihood we see another rate hike there? And do you think the market is going to react?
Yeah, look, I think the chairman was very clear. No more hikes this year. So I think we're done with the Fed funds rate. The funny thing about the Fed funds rate, I don't know about you, but I don't borrow at Fed funds. No one I know borrows at Fed funds. It's really a rate that is used for interbank transfers and loans, and a higher Fed funds rate allows the banks to have higher spreads, higher net interest margins, and it's good for bank profits. So I think that part of the market may cool down a little bit after having a nice run here lately, if there's not going to be any more increases in Fed funds. But overall, I don't think the market's looking at interest rates going forward. I think now everybody's focused on, he said there's going to be no recession. So now we can take the boogeyman off our back and focus on all this growth. Well, what growth? I mean, I don't see a lot of growth. I don't see any inflation. And inflation was a big part of that growth, in that prices were rising. So people put up higher sales numbers, but then they had higher costs, so the profits weren't going up as much. And look, I think the big thing for me is the earnings game that gets played. You just had a guest on talking about the Meta beat. Look, if you told me a year ago you were going to make $1, you told me 6 months ago you were going to make 50 cents, you told me last week you were going to make 10 cents, and then you make 11 cents, that's not a beat. Right? I mean, technically it's a beat and it goes in the books as a beat. But to me, that's like, being the high jump guy, and you go up and you take the bar off the rack, you put it on the ground, you jump over it, and you call yourself the world champ.
Step over it. Yeah. There's not even any jumping involved there.
No jumping.
Well, you mentioned the increasing liquidity. I want you to unpack that a little bit more for us. You've said that the Fed and other global central banks are quietly increasing liquidity. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it started with China back in October, and once again, China leads the way, as they are prone to do, in liquidity. They are the kings and queens of producing liquidity. You go back to 2017, and everybody said, the Fed bailed us out, and Bernanke was this hero. No, it was China. They printed $4 trillion with a T dollars, and starting in October, they created about $1 trillion worth of liquidity. The U.S. was still in QT. Quantitative tightening. Europe was still in tightening. And what's interesting, I haven't heard the word quantitative tightening in months. And nobody's talking about contraction of the money supply, because it's not contracting. It's actually rising. And when you have a rising money supply, you get a weaker currency, and then you get an increase in the price of things that are priced in that currency, like gold, like Bitcoin, and the like. So I think quietly they talk this rhetoric of, hey, we're still hawkish and we're still focused on inflation. Show me the inflation, right? We're at 3%, probably heading to sub 2. Chairman said it's not going sub 2. I'll take the under. The one funny thing about the Fed, and not the chairman, but the Fed is an organization. They have hundreds and hundreds of PhDs, and they forecast inflation and GDP every quarter. And they've been right 0 times. Out of almost 300 estimates, they've never been right. I could flip a coin and be right half the time. So I just think it's interesting. So there's either some gamesmanship in that they intentionally try to be wrong to, create an illusion of beat, right? That's they take the bar off and put it on the ground thing, or some other reason. But I'm not privy to that.
I want to change gears and talk about Bitcoin here. You recently predicted that the price of Bitcoin could reach a market cap equivalent to gold. That was on the Wolf of All Streets podcast. This would translate to a price of $300,000 for one Bitcoin. Unpack that for us. That is a big prediction, but when I heard you unpack it on the podcast, it made sense to me.
Yeah, and it's not an overnight prediction. It's not tomorrow. It goes like this, right? So gold is the only money in the world. And what is money? Money is an asset that exists in the absence of a liability. Now everybody says, well, what about all this other stuff? These dollars or yen or euros. We use them as money. Well, no, we use them as currency. And they're created by banks, central banks, and they're backed by debt. So it's not that they're bad or evil. It's just they're not money. Money is an asset that exists in the absence of a liability. And so for 5,000 years, it's a long time, gold has played that role. And we had experiments with other things along the way, puka shells and stone wheels and things like that. But gold has survived through belief and custom. And 1 ounce of gold for 5,000 years has bought a fine person's suit. So from Cleopatra's time to a suit of armor to a zoot suit in the 20s to Savile Row today, you or I could go to Savile Row and for a single ounce of gold, about $1,900, we could get a fine suit. And that's about what it would take. So what's changed? Well, gold suffers from two things. It's not very portable, meaning it's really heavy and clunky, and it's not very divisible. Like if I had a bar of gold here and go pull it out of the safe and I wanted to give you half, right? Because it's been a nice interview. I wanted to give you half. Even if I could break it in half, which I couldn't do, I'd have a hard time stuffing it in the computer and sending it to you. So it's not very divisible. I can't break it in half, and it's not very portable. I can't send it to you. Well, Bitcoin fixes both of those. It is equally scarce. Its stock to flow ratio is the same as gold. The amount that's lost or stolen every year roughly equals the amount that's created. And so it's a scarce asset. Well, why do scarce assets matter? Well, a scarce asset, which also exists in the absence of a liability, it wasn't created by a government with debt, has an interesting feature of being a perfect store of value. So as people realize that in the digital age, and Bitcoin being more divisible and more portable, I can punch a few buttons on my smartphone and send you Bitcoin immediately. You don't have to have a bank account. I don't need to have a bank account. We can make that transfer of wealth instantaneously. So the monetary value of gold, to sum up, is about $6 trillion, give or take. The total value of gold is about 11, but 5-ish of that is jewelry and chalices, and that doesn't really count. But the monetary that's in central banks around the world is about 6 trillion. I think Bitcoin can replace all of that. The monetary equivalent, 6 trillion, is about a 10x from here. So it gives us a price of about 300K.
All right. Well, when you talk us on that journey, like I said, the pieces start to come together really quickly before we wrap here. How long before you think we reach that 300K, or how long before we reach this future that you've just explained?
So look, I've said for years, so that was like a 10-year process, and we're probably 3-4 years into that. So I can still, I would say the next halving, not this halving in 2024, but the 2028. And where do I get that? Well, every halving, we've added a zero. We've about 10 times the market cap of Bitcoin. So we went from 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000. I think this halving next April, we go to 100,000 as fair value. But in these movements during crypto fall, right? We're in crypto summer today until next June. Then after the halving, we go to crypto fall. That's the parabolic, everybody's crazed and FOMO rules. We usually go above fair value. So I think we could get into the high hundreds, maybe even a couple hundred, but let's call it the high hundreds, 150, 180. And then we go into the next crypto winter. So we have our correction. Then for the next halving in 2028, the fair value jumps to $1 million. And people say, $1 million, that could never happen. Well, hopefully by that time, we're not talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about Satoshis. Because the Satoshi is the unit of measure that we should all, I think, be talking about, which is there are 100 million Satoshis per Bitcoin. And then we don't have to think about, well, Bitcoin's $1 million. No, a single Satoshi is worth fractions of pennies at some point.
All right, Mark, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining the show this morning.
Thanks for having me. Talk to you again soon.
That was Morgan Creek Capital CEO and CIO Mark Yusko. We're going to take a short break. Coming up, our next guest explains why he believes Worldcoin could have a major positive impact on crypto. We'll speak to the CEO of CoinFund next. Worldcoin could help onboard billions of users into the crypto economy. That's the thesis from CoinFund and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's crypto project. Joining us now to discuss is CoinFund CEO and founder Jake Brukhman. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Hi, Jennifer. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us talking about Worldcoin. Let's talk about that prediction I just mentioned. Billions is a lot of people. Why do you think that this is a possibility here?
I think that Worldcoin's, what attracted CoinFund to was Worldcoin's large global vision and Web3 focused technology and values. And one of the core propositions of Worldcoin is to build a system that can create a distribution of a cryptocurrency that's even wider, around the world than Bitcoin's is today. And what we see this week, as Worldcoin has officially launched, it's out there in 35 countries. Sam Altman tweeted yesterday that one person every 8 seconds is signing up, so that's about 11,000 people a day. And the digital assets have also had a strong showing, most of the time staying above a 20 billion FDV this week.
Now, Worldcoin, the token, is not available in the U.S. We've heard about some other countries, looking into the project since its launch. Does that worry you as an investor?
It doesn't. I think that we'll definitely get around to the U.S. In terms of the distribution. As you know, there's a regulatory environment in the U.S. right now that is being figured out. But overall, we're pretty bullish that Worldcoin will be very widely distributed.
Now, CoinFund was actually one of Worldcoin's early backers. The investment happened back in 2021. Talk to us about why the early support.
Yeah, I think at CoinFund, this is what we try to do: is we try to be early to, decentralization theses and technologies. And one of the things that we saw early in Worldcoin is just this incredibly robust solution to one of the key problems in decentralization technology. And of course, I'm referring to the idea of Sybil resistance, or the idea that decentralized systems can now have guarantees that certain wallets belong to a single human. Now, the use cases that this creates are widespread and far-reaching. I think we can now have voting systems in the blockchain space that are one person, one vote. We can have wider token distributions. We can have fair airdrops. We could start to build, very robust reputation systems. And just thinking about all the activity around Twitter recently, there's one really obvious solution to protecting people from bots, and that's proof of humanity, which is what Worldcoin provides. So across these use cases, we're just very excited about Worldcoin's future.
We often hear about investors, VCs, investing in the people and not necessarily the project. Is this a bet on Worldcoin, or is it a bet on Sam Altman, given everything else he's doing, especially in AI?
I have to say it's a little bit of both, but what's definitely been true is that the Worldcoin team are just an incredible all-star team. They created a piece of hardware that is completely custom, unrivaled, and is really a brand new piece of technology in the world. And most of that, of course, was done kind of internally by the team, and just these folks ship so effectively and so well. They should be really proud of the 3 years of work that they've put in here.
All right, Jake, we got to leave it there. I look forward to talking to you more about your investments on future shows. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jennifer.
That was CoinFund CEO and founder Jake Brukhman. That's it for First Mover today. We'll see you tomorrow for Friday's show at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. You're watching CoinDesk TV.